I'd like to welcome all of you to Razothorn's webinar. This session is discussing SIEM, the need for it, what it means, some top tips, all the usual kind of content that we would normally produce we're going to cover in this particular session. We also have LogPoint and Guy Grieve, who's going to show us LogPoint's solution, along with a number of slides and a bit of a demo. And then at the end, we're going to have a Q&A session where if any of you have any questions, please feel free to send them through. And we'll be more than happy to kind of cover them at the end. If there's any that are kind of expansive questions that maybe we need to take outside of that, then we'll be more than happy to kind of get in touch afterwards and answer any of those expansive questions in a little bit more detail. My name's James Rees. I'm the Managing Director of Razothorn. We are an information security consulting firm. We've been around since 2007, so quite a few years. And we were lucky enough to be recognized by Gartner in 2018 for our work with PCI DSS. We were in one of the top 10 for Europe, which was great for us. We deliver a number of different services, predominantly in the consulting side of things. So PCI DSS, security architecture, governance, that kind of stuff. Really, you know, if there's any kind of information security need, we can facilitate that and help you through that process, no matter what it may be. We also do a lot of kind of penetration testing and assurance services. It's like vulnerability management, sort of, as I mentioned before, pen testing, that kind of thing. So we can actually sort of test environments, be it people's perimeters, be it internal network infrastructure, as well as web applications and mobile applications as well. And that's the other arm of our business. And then finally, we do deal with a number of products. We have a number of strategic vendor relationships, obviously LogPoint being one of them, who you're going to be meeting a little bit later on. And you know, we can make sure that you get a good, cost-effective set of quotes for services, products, that kind of thing. We've delivered a lot of projects for a lot of large organizations and medium-sized operations across Europe and in the States. Some include people like ConocoPhillips, the UK Post Office, Goon Hilly Earth Station, which was quite an interesting sort of set of discussions. You name it, we've probably worked in that space. Many of them are kind of part of the Fortune 500. So that's a bit about Razothorn. Now me, what about myself? Well, I've been in the game now for quite a few years, something in the region of about 25. It's kind of hard to remember the exact number at this moment in time. But I've facilitated consultancy, I've done pen testing in my time, I've done a lot of PCI DSS, I've done a lot of ISO 27001. I also provide and fulfill a number of CISO roles for a number of different organizations. We do run things like CISO as a service, so there's a number of organizations that utilize that to allow us to sort of give them the advisories that they need. I've worked with all kinds of customers across all kinds of sectors, all kinds of sizes. I like to ensure that, you know, we put the business first. We don't facilitate security that is going to provide some kind of blocker to a customer. We prefer to kind of work with a culture, their infrastructure, the way that they want to run their business, to ensure that they get the relevant type of security that they require in order to give them confidence, as well as their customers confidence, that they're able to go forward and meet any particular issues or threats that they may have to their business going forward. I've been around a few blocks, look at it that way. So SIEM, that's what we're here to talk about today. First of all, let's answer the easy question. You know, what is a SIEM? SIEM stands for Security Information Event Management. It's been around for a couple of years now, more than a few years, but the coin SIEM was actually created by two Gartner researchers back in 2005. You know, we all like our acronyms here in security and in technology, and that's where originally it came from. So really, what is a SIEM? A SIEM is a solution that relies on feeds from systems, taking logs, alerts, anything sort of generated by those devices or services, puts them into a central area, analyzes and reports what it finds back to the SIEM operators, the individuals who are managing that SIEM. The information is correlated and it's analyzed and it's kind of put into a more readable format, usually through dashboards, although quite often you can generate things like reports, that kind of thing. Before SIEMs, network analysts and security analysts and people performing that function used to have to spend plenty of time grabbing logs from the various different services and analyzing them manually. And 25 years ago, I used to do the same kind of thing. So what used to be quite a significant job, and you used to get quite blind to log reviews because you were seeing raw unedited logs quite often, has really been kind of made a much better process through SIEM technology, which does a lot of that hard work for you. So really what you're looking at is the actual kind of logs and alerts that you're looking for, rather than endless logs in long lists, which used to be the fun and games that we used to have. The cool thing about SIEM was also you can set triggers for events as well. So if somebody's trying to repeatedly log in with an administrative account, you can set triggers, and there's usually pre-generated triggers as well, that will generate actual alerts and allow you to kind of focus on the actual issues that you're experiencing or potentially experiencing within the organization. And that can be pretty much anything, it depends on the device that you have within your environment. SIEM also increases the effectiveness and the efficiency of your problem management and your incident handling. Security and network analysts use that aggregating and reporting and the analysis output from SIEMs to provide valuable information on issues and security events, which are then used to facilitate that kind of problem management and incident handling process. So it means that, the people who are doing this kind of thing and trying to figure out what the issue is or where the hack is coming from, that kind of thing, they've actually got that information all bundled ready for them and put to hand. Gone are the days, as I mentioned before, where you'd have to trawl through endless logs. You'd have to look at devices in real time and try and figure out what's going on. SIEM is a really great way of kind of facilitating all of that hard work and making it much, much easier. So you're really focusing on what you absolutely need to focus, and it takes a lot less time to facilitate figuring out what is going on within the environment. And I think the other thing to remember is that SIEM does provide quite a high level of reporting for executives as to what really the security status of the network is. They don't want to see the endless reports. They just want to know that their environment is safe, secure, or if there's any issues that have been reported, that it's being handled quickly, efficiently, and effectively. And again, a lot of SIEM infrastructure provides things like reports, or at least provides the information for those kinds of executive reports to ensure that the people at the top level are aware of what's going on quickly, efficiently, and effectively. And the other thing that I didn't put on the slide, but I've kind of added in first thing this morning, there's a lot of compliance programs out there, such as PCI DSS, ISO 27001, HIPAA, whatever, you name a compliance program. A lot of them require reviews of logs. They require you to understand what's going on in your environment. And SIEM is an excellent way of cutting down a lot of the workload and facilitating those compliance programs requirements, which means you're spending a lot less time doing the onerous work, and when your auditor comes in or whatever to do reviews or to do your audits, they can see that you're efficiently and effectively managing that because of the amount of data that you have available to them when they come to do those reviews. So the future of SIEM, one of the things I like to cover is where I think things are going. And of course, nobody can turn around and say that this year has not been interesting in the extreme. Obviously, the world is rapidly changing, and with everybody now predominantly working from home, some people are pretty much permanently working from home. Others are doing it on a part-time basis, and some are, just their organisations have taken the decision to reduce their headcount in centralised offices, which means we've gone to a very much more distributed workplace. A lot of organisations have actually said they're going to do this going forward once COVID has hopefully been vaccinated, or that particular threat has gone. So going forward, SIEM is going to be very useful and very highly recommended for organizations of any real size. Predominantly it was larger organizations that tended to have this kind of thing for a long time, because they had a lot of devices, they had a lot of services that they needed to monitor and manage. But we're seeing a lot more mid-size organizations starting to find it beneficial for them to operate with, mainly because their workforce is all over the place. They're at home, they're on potentially untrusted networks. So being able to hook in all the logs and alerts being generated, as well as those environments, into one centralized area is like gold dust to them. We're moving from a very much more centralized security model now to a very decentralized security model. So we need to be able to facilitate that, and SIEM is a perfect answer to that. I think the other thing that we're potentially predicting, and it's not a particularly pleasant thing to discuss, but it's something that we should probably point out, that when you look at the stats coming out of the news and what HMRC are reporting, there's potentially going to be quite a large scale set of redundancies for IT and security workforces come the end of October when the furlough ends. This is going to mean that potentially sort of SIEM technology that's already in place or whatever may not being monitored, because the people who were originally monitoring it have either been downsized or removed entirely due to sort of financial issues or the downturn. So we are predicting quite a significant rise in the need for managed SIEMs, where third parties will actually sort of manage that for you, and it's important to do a bit of homework there, and we'll cover that in the kind of top tips at the end. But a well-managed SIEM is going to be, we predict, the number one requirement as a baseline of security for 2021 and going forward. I don't think that's going to change. SIEMs are important. And they're going to continue becoming more and more important. So I've spoken quite a bit now, and I'd like to introduce you to Guy Grieve. He's from LogPoint. Guy, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Fantastic. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for being a part of this, and thanks obviously to LogPoint as well. I mean, whilst we kind of do the handover, because I know you've got a number of slides and a bit of a demo to go through, well, what's your current view on where the market is and with what's going on at the moment, where you're seeing as a vendor SIEM playing a part in the future, as well as, are you experiencing a lot more questions for, how can we integrate this with the changes that we're looking at, and the product, the changes in services that we're looking at having to implement over the next kind of couple of years? What's your view on that?
Yes, I think, of course, we are in this odd time, as you say, in which really it has just accelerated what was going to be, really. The working from home culture is definitely growing. And of course, the spanned networks are now becoming even more spanned, to the fact that, we have nearly everyone in the UK with a small home office setup. So one thing we are seeing is the need and requirement to grow that monitoring capability, because what once was a need to monitor the firewalls and the AD, that's now growing to the point of, well, actually, there is quite a lot of activity going on local workstations. And of course, new technologies come out in which they state, yep, this is where the future is going. But SIEM has been around a long time, and all we've ever seen is SIEM to grow and evolve with the requirements of organizations and users. SIEM originally started off as we just need to do some basic logging. But now we have advanced correlation, we have machine learning, we have automated response. It's all built into a technology that continues to thrive as the world changes. So I think, with the industry moving drastically, very quickly, of course, I think that's something that SIEM can still have everyone covered on.
I totally agree with you, and I think, going forward, the need for good reporting, especially at the endpoint, people are using the home networks now. I mean, points of attack is from a lot of the kind of malicious individuals is going to be very much more now refocused on the weakest point in the chain. And of course, the weakest point in the chain is going to be, where people sat there with their laptops on their home offices or their desks or whatever. So absolutely, totally agree. But I'm going to hand over to Guy now to go through kind of LogPoint. Again, if you've got any questions, please feel free to put them up, and then we'll cover them kind of towards the end of the process. So I'll hand over to Guy now. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you shortly.
Amazing. Thank you, James. So thank you to everyone who's joined today. What I'll do is I'll take us through the slides as quick as possible, but as informative as possible, and then we'll jump into a demonstration in which we'll see the solution in action. As James mentioned, any questions, please feel free just to pop them in the box, and we'll get to them at the end of the presentation and demonstration. So I think that the first thing that we need to understand is what is, why do we have the need for SIEM? And first thing, if we just simply look at the threat landscape, what we actually traditionally see is, while we have the high percentage of breaches conducted by organized criminal groups, which we would expect, what we're actually seeing though is there's a huge percentage of the breaches that are actually internal threats. And this is not something that your firewall is likely to notice. Like I said, traditionally we always thought of security and we jump straight to, we need that firewall in place, we need antivirus, etc. But antivirus and firewalls aren't really going to stop someone from maybe just emailing their own personal Gmail account with some confidential information, or bringing in a USB stick and just popping in whatever they want onto the system. And we actually see a fundamental gap between breaches taking essentially minutes to be activated. So 87% happen within minutes, yet the majority of breaches take months to actually detect. And going back to what James said, one of the very definitive things about a lot of compliance and regulations is not only, yes, you should do your best to protect against yourself, but you also need to start understanding how the attacker got in. What did they take? So being able to provide that evidence shows that you have that monitoring capability and you can prevent it happening in the next time, if there was, unfortunately, a next time. And when we continue looking at the threat landscape, now we've seen from the source of cybersecurity ventures that last year alone, there was 11.5 billion worth of total damage from ransomware alone. And that's just down to the downtime, etc. That doesn't even account for example, the legal costs. So we've seen Life Labs in Canada. They alone received a $1 billion fine in damages just for being breached. So privacy being exposed, etc. So there is a huge reason to want to protect against these threats, not just from keeping your organization safe and running, but from an actual business cost of running sense. There is unfortunately the bigger threat out there. And of course we have various different things as well that we need to be looking at. While we do continuously see more advanced strains of ransomware, we still also can't forget the fact that there are social engineering techniques out there. There's simple brute force or phishing attacks that are going on. So really what we're starting to notice is that area of attack is actually just continuing to expand. It's not focusing on a specific threat reactor. We need to ensure that we have full coverage across the entire network of the entire attack spectrum. And in the unfortunate event that we are under scrutiny for an attack, who responds? We have a global shortage of cybersecurity professionals, as James mentioned, and it makes it also incredibly difficult to obtain and retain skilled talent. So what we're witnessing is, the global shortage of cybersecurity professionals, making it, we need to start understanding how we can reduce the amount of time that we're spending in our software, in our applications, and in our procedures. And we need to start looking at how we can prepare for the lack of man hours and lean IT teams. So really, we need some form of automation, essentially a virtual analyst that is inexpensive to train, inexpensive to maintain, and of course, easy to retain. So we need some form of low maintenance modern SIEM UEBA. But of course, when we start talking about SIEM, we sometimes, there are typically challenges. So of course, as we are all using systems more and more, we have more and more data to ingest. But of course, we always have a solution for a problem or a challenge at LogPoint, and that's what we hope to be able to show you here. So, we can't catch the unknown threats. That's fine. We have you have your back with UEBA. Correlating data is incredibly difficult. Usually, we can do that easily. For example, detect lateral movement, and I'll talk a bit more how that's possible. We have automatic timelines for investigation, and we can integrate with some of the industry-leading SOAR platforms out there for automated response. And of course, all of this is covered by our flat licensing, in which we don't care about how much data you bring into LogPoint. The more data, the better, the more coverage you have, and the more you're covered on the security aspects. But that's all covered on a per node basis. So it's simply down to how many servers do you have that you want to monitor, for example. So SIEM at a glance. Now, the reason we also like to bring this up is, of course, security is always the priority of SIEM. It's in the title. However, one thing that we really do like to stress is it's not just security. What we have is an analytics platform. And with that, it's not just firewalls that come in. It's not just Active Directory. Data is data to us. If there's something, a log file that's there that you think has some interesting information, we want to bring that into LogPoint. And that can be your typical IoT devices. It can simply be printer usage. It could be SCADA systems. It could be your SAP instance. Anything that is data, bring that in. And from that, after we've done our analytics on that, that's when you can receive the reward for compliance, security, IT operations, but also business analytics. How are we maximizing our efficiencies? How do I prove my compliance? And how do I ensure that my perimeter security and internal security is where it needs to be? So of course, with our core SIEM, you receive this incredibly powerful analytics engine that allows you to view the data you need to see when you need to see it. Having that vendor agnostic single taxonomy really does allow you to easily correlate and analyze the entire ecosystem of your organization and present it with a clean, modern user interface. When the data is in front of us in an easy to understand format, we have further understanding as to where we need to look and where we need to respond, of course, reducing our time to action. And to take it a step further from that, when UEBA was, first started coming around, of course, people didn't quite understand that UEBA is simply there to advance SIEM. It's not there to replace SIEM, it's there to work with SIEM. So of course, we have still the use cases and the relevancy of, we need to ensure we're doing this mass logging. We still need those static rules in place. But with some attacks becoming more increasingly sophisticated, smash and grab tactics have been replaced by low and slow attacks. With UEBA, that's where we can start recognizing the patterns and anomalies in which conventional static rules may not have detected it. So for example, a user logs on maybe at a normal time. That's interesting, but there are many reasons they may have logged in at an abnormal time. But a user that logs in at an abnormal time, followed by them attempting to access a share they've never accessed, nor do they even have access to, following with a user from the same IP, logs on and starts accessing that share, that's something very interesting. And that is something that conventional techniques potentially wouldn't detect, but with baseline and continuous supervised machine learning, that's where UEBA really comes into its stronghold in supporting SIEM, in protecting your organization. And I also want to bring your thoughts and attention to the pyramid of pain. So David Bianco had this pyramid of pain, and the idea is to show the relationship between the types of indicators you may see and may use to detect adversaries' activities and how much pain it will cause them when you're to deny those indicators. So for example, hash values, they are incredibly easy to block. We have simple antivirus out there that will simply block the hash values. Very easy to detect and search for as well. And of course, with that, it's also very easy to also change this hash value. You know, you can enter a file and hit the space bar and that's the hash changed. IP addresses, we all probably have applications on our iPhones and our Androids. You press a button, your IP address is changed once again. Very easy and very little pain to change IP addresses, and also for the actual organization, also very easy to detect. But as we go through, up through domain names, up through network and host artifacts and tools, we start getting to the apex, which is our TTPs, our threats, techniques, our tactics, techniques, and procedures. And when you start detecting and responding at this level, you are operating directly on the adversary's behaviors, not against their tools. For example, you're detecting the pass the hash attack themselves, perhaps by inspecting the Windows data, rather than the tools that they've used to carry out those attacks. From a pure effectiveness standpoint, this is your ideal level to be responding at. If you're able to respond to an adversary's TTP quickly enough, you force them into doing the most time-consuming possible thing: learn new behaviors. Because if we start changing tools, for example, and blocking the tools, they can simply just use the same tool, just change the name. With behavior, it's very hard to have to completely go back to the drawing board and rethink the entire routine that they have. And of course, this is where the MITRE ATT&CK framework sits. So with MITRE, and for those who maybe still don't know, MITRE is a US organization that developed the ATT&CK framework. And the ATT&CK framework's there really to classify adversarial tactics. But the real beauty of MITRE comes from its ability to strike an almost impossible balance from being broad enough to work across many vendors and technologies, but also detailed enough to be effective for the security analysis. So essentially, this industry-wide adoption of a way of describing hacking or red teaming activities from a high level to an in-depth detail, a way to classify the observations we actually see in the network. And of course, with better detection, with better classification, and standardization of attack classes within our own platform comes that better detection. So with this framework, we're taking this brilliantly detailed framework from MITRE, which is easy to navigate and easy to understand, and we're dropping that into the heart of the analytics of LogPoint. So as I mentioned, MITRE is something that is becoming an industry standard and widely adopted by many vendors. And this is something we're very excited to bring into LogPoint ourselves. So with that, we'll jump into a quick product demonstration, just to give you an idea of what the product looks like and how it operates. So the first thing we receive when we come into the demo platform is, of course, our UEBA. Now, as I mentioned, UEBA is about looking for those things that you maybe wouldn't think about looking for. It's something that maybe the static rules wouldn't necessarily be able to detect. And that's what UEBA is there for. So out of 114 million events that have been analyzed, we've seen 2,500 anomalies, with 3 of the entities being incredibly risky. So of course, exploring into this is when, once again, we're given the data that we want to see instantaneously. So straight away, we can see those high risk users. And something we do is we actually limit that risk score to 100. We don't continue to grow that number past 100 and apply accelerators and make this very complicated. While UEBA and all machine learning can be complex as a topic, it doesn't need to be complex as a solution. So we've got Joshua Newman there, 87 as a risk score, and we also have a nice outline of when these anomalies happened, what we maybe want to be paying attention to. It's very easy to see straight away. Red is what we need to pay attention to. Clicking into Joshua, this is where we get that automatic timeline of some of his events. And what you'll see is, of course, the first time Joshua acts a bit abnormal, we have detected it, we've logged it, but we've said, you know what, everyone sometimes does things a bit different. But as he continues to act abnormally and anomalies continue to show he is the outlier, we start increasing that risk score. And of course, the more anomalies that he produces, the more his risk score goes up to that 100, which is our top rating. And you'll see sometimes, as I mentioned, Joshua Newman worked in this hour, which was unusual. So it's something that is, you know, it's out of the ordinary, but hey, we don't need to understand if people just have insomnia. That's for the doctors to know, not for our organization. However, where this did become increasingly interesting is the fact that before this, he had significantly higher amounts of time logged into a server significantly more times per hour than he typically does. So people typically log into this 1.5 times per hour, whereas he did it 6 times. It's also flagged up that Joshua Newman has failed to access attempts on a shared drive. And we continue to go on to even see, actually, Josh is uploading more data than he typically would. Normally he does 812 kilobytes. He smashed that with 1.3 gigabytes. So it's clear that with one anomaly, okay, we don't maybe need to worry about, but with multiple coming in and being able to chain those together, this is something that you really need to know about and you need to respond to as soon as possible. And of course, with the rest of the dashboarding that we have here, as I mentioned, the idea here is just to give you some visual context. So we can configure these any way we like with the data we want. We can have this presented in any form we want. We can easily change this. And something that LogPoint does that we're very proud of is we provide as much predefined content as we possibly can. We do appreciate, as we mentioned, there is that skill shortage. There's also the incredible tight teams that we have within IT organizations. And we need to make sure that SIEM, while it has had this reputation over the past X amount of years of it takes a while to be installed, it takes a lot of maintenance, with predefined content, we say you can actually be up and running with LogPoint within about 3 days. And we just simply throw in some predefined content and start populating that data. And the reason we can do this is we use a common taxonomy. That means it doesn't matter if you have a Palo Alto firewall with Cisco switches and CrowdStrike endpoint protection. All of these technologies come back to LogPoint, and we have the signatures to translate all of those different log messages and data messages into the same LogPoint language. User equals source underscore address equals, no matter where it comes from and which vendor. So with that, we have this easy correlation across the entire ecosystem. And it also allows you to use our predefined content. There is no data mapping we need to do. There is no chance of, oh, well, you know, you bring it in from Cisco, this one only supports, you know, HP switches. There's none of that. We have a standardized language that makes it incredibly easy to get that value instantaneously. And everything we provide is, of course, accessible free of charge within the license. There is no extra packages, for example, that you need to purchase, and it's all editable as well from yourself. So if you want to change something in there, we're not precious, go ahead and change it. And before I go into anything else, I want to show the search templates. These are perhaps my favorite thing in here. So if I just go ahead and take Joshua's out there, when we hit update, what we're going to see is very much something exactly the same as dashboarding. And we can see there's a lot of activity going on. We can see some incidents that have been raised. We can see the average risk score. We can see servers that have been involved in incidents, etc., and also that attack framework. So we even get an overview of how many techniques has LogPoint detected of attack. And of course, because attacks a standardized framework and LogPoint has a standardized single taxonomy, once again, that means that the majority of the techniques and tactics seen within MITRE ATT&CK, we've already predefined them as alert rules, and they're ready to be turned on within a few ticks of a button. But just going back to the perimeters, now we understand speed is something we really need to be, quick on. We need to make sure that we can get that data to your fingertips as soon as possible with as little effort as possible, saving you time. Also, hopefully helping you with reducing your time to action as well. But now we've seen Joshua Newman, we've seen he had that high UEBA risk score. That's where we can come into this search template, and we can simply put in the username under the perimeter, hit update, and what we then see is we actually have it now specifically under Josh. So we've previously seen those initial access, but with Josh specifically, we haven't seen that. So we can skew the entire information and visualization around an entity, or it could have been an address, or it could be a file name, it could be absolutely anything that you wanted to build here. And you could start understanding what is happening with that specific entity. Reporting, so there is, of course, the need. Sometimes we maybe find an incident, we find maybe a threat that's been on the network. We've built up our use cases and we've been able to detect, okay, this is the initial access. This is maybe where weaponization and the execution of that weaponization happened, etc. We can bundle all that automatically into a report. So we've got the threat covering, but also on that, you can see in this instance, there is GDPR, there's ISO compliance, SOX compliance, etc. So we actually make sure that we once again provide as much predefined content for you so you can easily create reports from the get-go. And of course, these can be ran as an ad hoc report, but you can also go ahead and make sure that you can schedule this, or whether that be hourly, weekly, daily, monthly, however it is, and of course, choose your export format. And finally, as well, as you can imagine, there is the ability to customize all reports, whether you want it all as just bar charts. If you want a bar chart next to a donut chart, that's absolutely fine. You choose how the data is represented, and of course you can put your own corporate image on there as well. Moving on to the incident side of things, so where we see incidents, so every time that you have an alert that is triggered, what we're also going to do is raise an incident. So while you may have been alerted from an external source, so for example, maybe it's your email, maybe it's integration with ServiceNow, and you've been advised, okay, well, you need to come into LogPoint and look at something. This is where you can come to view that data instantaneously. Instead of just seeing, okay, there's something that I need to know about, and I've now come to my SIEM, and where do I look? This is where incidents really points you in the direction. So you can even glance at the information by hitting incident data, or we can even jump in if we started wanting to do some deep diving into the actual raw data. And of course, this actually gives you a really good example of where we can see the single taxonomy. For example, even if that raw data said, target user, or if it just said username, anything like that, we convert it into the same key value pair of user equals Joshua Newman. And that, of course, means that we can see multiple different sources across multiple different vendors with one search. Finally, the last thing to really go ahead and give you a quick overview on, and once again, there are hundreds of different features, including enrichment, our 4 eyes principle of data privacy, the lists and tables, but to give you a really good understanding of just how much content we aim to provide. If we go into our vendor rules, and bearing in mind, we don't import every single package by default for you, simply because you don't need some maybe specific Cisco packages if you don't have Cisco on the network. But of the ones that we have implemented, we've got over 52 pages of predefined alerts. And these are just ready for you to go ahead and enable choose how you want to be alerted, and sit back and relax while let the SIEM do the work for you. So with that, I can hand back over to James, and I just wanted to give you a very quick overview of LogPoint, and of course we can go in more depth on a one-to-one basis, but I hope you guys found that very useful.
Fantastic. Thank you ever so much, Guy. That was brilliant. I love that dashboard. I love the, some of the stuff that you can do within it, and the way that it kind of tags the events. Fantastic. Really, really good. We've got a number of customers who utilize this product, and they're all happy with it. It's brilliant. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So, SIEM top tips. One of the things we like to do in all of our outputs that we do when it comes to content that we deliver, be it sort of via this kind of medium or any other medium, we always find it's useful for people to kind of understand that everything comes with a couple of tips. SIEM obviously being one of them. One of the main ones really is when you're building your network infrastructure, be it from scratch or whether you're rebuilding your infrastructure due to changes that have occurred. Obviously, we mentioned the kind of COVID thing. Adopt your SIEM as early as possible as part of that process. When you're doing large-scale changes, infrastructure sort of growths, that kind of thing, new infrastructure, a SIEM will tell you potentially where there are issues like misconfigurations, errors, that kind of thing, as well as any attacks that may be occurring as you're building that environment. Quite often environments take a little while to build and tune and get right. Don't put your SIEM in at the end, because quite frankly, it's probably a bit too late. So adopt it as early as possible and allow it to organically grow as your environment changes. And obviously with the current kind of situation with a more decentralized network and workforce, it's quite important to make sure that you get it as quickly as possible. The other top tip obviously is manage your SIEM. Quite often we see a lot of people who would install a nice big expensive SIEM or a nice sort of well-founded SIEM, and they kind of just leave it. Don't just leave your SIEM. Review it. Have a team of people looking at it. Make sure that you're handling any events and logs that come through. Sometimes SIEMs, as mentioned by Guy, there's a certain amount of tuning that needs to happen. Sometimes there's a little bit of noise that comes out of them initially. Don't start turning stuff off arbitrarily to stop alerts from occurring. Understand why those alerts are coming through. Is it because of an issue or a misconfiguration, or is it something genuinely happening? Another top tip: if you can't manage your own SIEM efficiently and effectively, select a managed service. There's plenty of managed services out there. We're currently in the middle of designing similar kind of services, for sale as a service. But with everything going on at the moment, and obviously with mass redundancies being predicted, make sure that if you are going to go down the route of having a SIEM, that you've got the people to actually manage it, and if not, go for some kind of managed service that can do that for you. And then finally, please review your SIEM at least quarterly. Just make sure that everything's connected correctly, that it's getting all the alerts from all the infrastructure that's been put in or changed or updated or whatever. Make sure there's no gaps or holes. Make sure the monitoring is occurring correctly and your triggers are set properly, or whether or not you need to add any triggers. SIEM is not a kind of a install and forget kind of product. It's more of it takes time, it takes a bit of care, a bit of attention, and like any security requirement, review it to make sure it's efficient and it's effective. Okay. There's probably other top tips. I'm more than happy to share them at a later date with similar kind of content that we're going to release over time. But for the moment, let's get to the kind of Q&A. We've got a couple of questions here, quite a few about LogPoint, which is great. So the first question, and Guy, this is probably one for you. I know what the answer is probably going to be, but how easy is LogPoint SIEM to integrate, and what does it work with?
There we go. I found my unmute button. It's a great question. So with LogPoint, really, when we start looking at what it does it integrate with, as I mentioned, anything that has accessible data, that's something we want to support. So something really great with LogPoint is, of course, we have, I believe, over about 500 vendor packages already supported, and that's various different on-prem and cloud solutions. If there is for example, a vendor out there that we currently haven't supported their data coming in yet, that's something that's actually included within your license, that we will create that support free of charge. It traditionally is done very quickly as well, rather than, and we're not talking weeks, etc., for that to be done. We're more in the days category. With that as well, we already have about maybe 20 odd different ways of supporting the data ingestion, whether that be via the typical syslog, whether that be, as I mentioned, maybe an Office 365 fetcher or Azure event hubs. That can also be something, like SFlow, Snare. We have agents for Windows, unless you want to use your own, such as NXLog. In which we can start using flat file collections. So the amount of products we work with essentially is endless, really. And of course, integration is incredibly simple. And I think that the last point to make on there is, even if there is a product that has maybe been in-house developed, or you've maybe went to a third party and they've developed a solution specifically for your organization, that's also something we're willing to, LogPoint wants to see. So we even give you the exact same tools as our support team use to create the normalization packages yourself. So you can create that conversion from raw data to LogPoint language yourself. And it's actually incredibly simple. You can, muddle your way through it. It's also covered in the basic training of LogPoint as well. So integration's a key thing for us, and the more we can integrate with, the better.
Fantastic. That's great news. I mean, the fact that you guys are willing to kind of, said there's like a niche product out there that nobody's really heard of before, or something up and coming, that they can just get in contact with you guys, or take it to the support team and just say, look, we got this particular product, this is the kind of output, have a bit of a discussion with them, and then you can create packages for them. Yeah,
exactly. All we say is, can we maybe have a few example lines so we can understand the structure of that message, and then we go ahead and pop it in. Of course, if it's standard JSON, we can even use generic JSON to bring that in as well. So we're very, very eager to support as many things as possible. And of course, with those vendor specific products, as I mentioned, they are completely free of charge for the support to be added, because, sharing is caring. Once we've done that for yourself, it's then available for other customers and vice versa.
Fantastic. So we've got another question for you. What is the cost model? Very direct.
So cost model is very much, I didn't really cover it in too much depth, but it's very much based on a per node entity. So what I mean by that is, for example, if you wanted to bring in 10 Windows servers, that's 10. Simple as. A firewall is now 11, etc., etc. And that's a flat pricing. So even if, for example, your server was to, unfortunately come under attack and your EPS spikes 10 times because of all the activity going on it, that's not going to affect your license in any way. The licensing is simply on how many log sources do you want to bring in. That's it. Okay. We also offer, because we do appreciate there is a bigger working from home culture, as I mentioned. And while we still operate very much with, for example, you may work from home, but you're probably on Citrix, or you're probably utilizing an application that's going through the VPN to the server, there is still a lot more activity, outside of the organization walls. So devices such as workstations, which are seen to be very, low in the amount of noise they would make, they don't provide, the data for everyone. They typically would get classed as what we would call a light node, in which they work out approximately a tenth of the cost of a single node. So you can have 10 workstations for the cost of one server.
Fantastic. That's really good, because I know some do it on throughput, and as you say, you can never quite guarantee. Obviously, if you've got a big event happening and it's generating a ton of logs, the last thing you want to see is licensing issues because the amount of throughput suddenly increased by 10 times. Fantastic.
Exactly. And we want to be as transparent as possible. So, if you know yourself that next year you are going to be reducing the amount of servers, then of course, good news, your license cost is going to decrease. And, likewise on the other side, it allows you to easily budget and be predictable on how much extra it may cost you next year. Unlike, when you are basing it on throughput or amount stored, you are basically having to, play this gambling roulette game of how much is it going to cost at the time of my quotation. That's not what we're about. It's about being as transparent as possible.
Fantastic. So we have another question. What support do you give your customers? I mean, some of that was obviously covered with that last piece, but what kind of support do you guys offer as part of the licensing program?
Yeah, so as standard, we give everyone support with their license. That's included in the license automatically. And of course, that covers you with, of course, I need a new log source supported. It even occurs with the very small chance of, I have a technical issue, please assist. And of course, they'll always be able to remote on and have a look at this and explain to you what has happened. And of course, we also can do that 24/7. And we can even have a look at having the guys go on and tune the system if ever required. So there's definitely a lot of support offered out there. And as I mentioned, it's all more or less included in the license. And something that we're very proud of is I believe we've currently got a 98% satisfaction with LogPoint support. So we're very proud of our support team, and it's something that we can definitely go into more depth with whoever asked that.
Fantastic. So we have another one. I know the guy it's come from. Fantastic. It'd be really interesting to see how LogPoint can be deployed or configured to a business that operates primarily in the cloud. How the software can support a very fast-moving organization without adding any blockers or slowing down day-to-day operations. What's your thoughts on that?
It's a pretty good question. So this is also, once again, so relating back to the license model is only down to how many sources are coming in. So with that means you can deploy as LogPoint as many times as you want. So with the architecture, which I didn't really cover, the architecture we can split into three categories, really. We've got collection, we have storage, and we have analytics, the search head. With those three, we can have as many as we want within your license. You can have as many collected boxes that are doing the collection, which grabs the logs, it normalizes, compresses, and sends to the storage. You can have as many as them. You can have as many storage areas, and of course, you can have as many search heads. It all depends on, of course, how much you need to, how much you require out of that solution. So with that, with the unlimited deployment model, really, and the fact that you can split the appliance up however you like. You can have it as an all-in-one, which does all those three tasks, or you can have it split out. So something does the collection specifically, something stores specifically, and something searches specifically. And you can build the architecture to however you want. So I kind of, we're a Danish company, and I see with the Lego of sins, another Danish company, and we can really scale the operation upwards and downwards and sideways in any way you need to do to grow with your business needs. Now, of course, what we offer when you are LogPoint customers, you simply get some images and an ISO. And like I said, it's up to you how many times you install this. If you want that installed in AWS, then that's fine. Azure, that's fine. On-prem is fine. It's also fine to have it spread across the entirety. So you could have an instance in AWS, you could have an instance in Azure, and also instances on-prem, and you can link them all up together so they can all read each other's data, and you can search the entire instance. So as you say, if the business is very fast moving and there's quite a lot of changes in direction of the organization, that's where we really hope LogPoint and really believe LogPoint can support your requirements.
Fantastic. Fantastic. So there's one for me directly. Oh, there we go. That'd be an interesting one. Jim, what would be your advice in putting together a proposal for a security program within a young organization with a view to mature and grow the function in line with the business without the focus being just on the cost to run such a program? Now, that's a very good question, albeit quite an expansive one. Every organization is very different. Okay, and from a security standpoint, no two organizations are exactly the same. One of the things that's very key when you're building a security program for an organization is you look at the organization itself. You look at the DNA makeup of that organization. What is it they're there to do? What revenue streams do they have? Where are they going? What is the intention? Especially if it's a young organization with, quick growth, you need to be adaptable with your security. And one of the key things that I always say to people is, security doesn't need to be expensive, but it just needs to be effective. If you're running a security program based on cost alone, you're probably not going to end up with a great security program. Everything does come at a cost, but people, procedure, process, you've got to have good governance, you've got to have good procedures. If something goes wrong, a single way of doing things or a particular tried and tested way of doing things is important. But it all has to be supported by the culture of that business, and I think that's where sometimes security programs goes drastically wrong. If you put in a security program that's not supported by the rest of the staff because they find it onerous, they don't understand it, they don't want to do it, then your security program is going to fail, or you're going to wind up getting into hot water maybe with the executives, because they're going to be getting reports from their staff that security is blocking them from doing something that they want to do. So try to avoid that at all costs. But remember, security is a funny area to be in because it is fast moving. I mean, people say IT is fast moving, and it is, don't get me wrong. I mean, there's new stuff coming out all the time. Technology has progressed a great deal since, the internet became a thing. We've got a rate of change that is quite staggering, and developments happening in things like AI and all kinds of things. But, security can change in a blink of an eye. Boom, some malicious actor out there finds some way to compromise an operating system. He will then tell his group of people. They will then exploit it, and at some point it will get out to the wider malicious community, who will then start exploiting it, and so on and so forth. These people do talk. So you need to be agile, you need to be quick, and you need to be adaptable in the way that you're addressing your security. Defense in depth. When you're putting security into a young organization, if you're doing it early, similar to kind of like the top tip about SIEM, if you're putting security in early and allowing it to grow organically as the company does, with the culture, with what you're doing, having a view on where the executives want to push the business, then your security program will be efficient and effective. There will be a cost, because there always is, be it a product that you need to purchase to protect your endpoint or whatever. But the cost of having good security versus not having any security and having an event is totally, well, why would you? I mean, one of the interesting points that Guy mentioned in his slides was, I think it was 11.5 billion in, when was it, 2017?
2019, yeah.
2019. Well, the global cost of cybercrime predicted for 2021 is actually something in the region of I think it was $6.1 trillion, more than the global drug trade. But obviously with the stats are changing all the time with everything going on. I released an article a little while back about the fact that cybercrime is on the exponential increase because people are losing their jobs. Well, a lot of these malicious actors that are taking advantage of this, they're losing their jobs, so the only other way that they can make money is by compromising people and sending that information on. More than happy to discuss this with the individual offline, because it's very much key towards that organisation. But Guy, I know you wanted to mention something.
Oh, sorry, what was the last bit?
About the program. You keyed in saying that you'd like to answer the question. Or was that an accident?
Oh, sorry, no, I was just marking them off as answered. Sorry about that.
Okay, no problems. All right then. Well, I mean, we're rapidly reaching over time. I just got the indication from a lovely marketing person. If you have any further questions that you want us to ask, then please feel free to contact me directly at james.rees@razothorn.com. Our website is obviously www.razothorn.com, and there's the number there for you to call through to the switchboard and just ask for myself, and either myself or one of the team will get back in touch with you. Thank you ever so much for being a part of this webinar and coming and listening in. We are going to be releasing a number of different pieces of content over the next however long, podcasts, webinars, vlogs. So please keep an eye on the company's sort of blogs and the company marketing stuff that's coming out. It'd be great for you guys to be a part of it. Guy and LogPoint, thank you ever so much for being a part of all of this. As always, you've been brilliant. And look after yourselves, everybody. I know times are tough, but let's get through it. Thanks ever so much, and look after yourselves. Thank you.
Thanks for having us, James. Bye.
Thank you. Cheers, Guy.